My name is Owen Whitmore. I'm 29 years old, and 6 months ago I signed a piece of paper that made me the legal owner of a house my own family had already sold behind my back. At my grandmother's memorial dinner, my Uncle Gerald stood up, tapped his glass and told me to sign the waiver. It's just a formality, Owen. The house is going to sell either way. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I smiled. I nodded. I told him I'd think about it. Then I drove home and called a number my grandmother had given me 4 years earlier, a number I was told to use only when the time comes. The next morning, Gerald found out the winning bid on 214 Maple Hollow Road had come from a private trust he had never heard of. He read the name on the paperwork twice before he understood it. My Aunt Carol, who had already spent an evening picking out furniture for her new lake house, called me screaming into the phone. I let her finish. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 8 years to a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and rain, when my grandmother said something to me I didn't understand until the night I signed that paper. Her name was Eleanor Reeves, and her house on Maple Hollow Road was the only place I ever felt like the walls weren't listening. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and old wood, a smell that had soaked so deep into the cabinets that even an empty room carried it. The floorboards by the pantry creaked in one specific spot, a soft groan, like the house was clearing its throat. And I could always tell when she was coming before I saw her. Her hands were rough and warm, cracked at the knuckles from 60 years of gardening, and when she held mine, she'd press her thumb into my palm like she was checking I was still real. I was 14, the summer she taught me to make her bread. Flour dust hung in the afternoon light, coming through the window over the sink, turning gold, turning slow, like the whole kitchen had decided to breathe easier. She'd let me knead the dough too long, on purpose, just so I'd have something to do with my hands while she talked. People will tell you what they want you to hear, she said that day, not looking up from the bowl. Watch what they do with their hands instead. Hands don't lie the way mouths do. I didn't understand it then. I thought she was talking about kneading bread. At home, 3 miles away, the air was different. My father worked long hours and said little. My Uncle Gerald visited on holidays, wearing a version of warmth that never reached his eyes, always angling the conversation toward what things were worth. My Aunt Carol admired Grandma's china, not for the stories in it, but for what it might fetch. I noticed the difference the way a kid notices weather, not with words, just with a low, steady unease in my stomach whenever Gerald walked into a room and started looking at the furniture like it belonged to him already. Grandma's house was warm in a way our house never was. The porch light stayed on for me even when I came home late from school on the bus that dropped me 2 streets over. The couch had a permanent dent shaped like her, and I used to sit in it and feel like I was being held by something that wasn't even in the room. I didn't know yet that a house could be a weapon or a shield. I didn't know that the small, careful decisions she made in that kitchen, decisions I never saw, would end up protecting me long after she was gone. But I remember one afternoon, maybe 6 months before she got sick, catching Gerald standing in her hallway with a tape measure, saying to no one in particular that this space could really open up. Grandma stood in the doorway watching him. She didn't say a word. She just watched his hands. I didn't understand yet what she already knew. There was a particular Sunday, late autumn, when the maple outside her kitchen window had dropped its leaves in one long orange carpet across the yard, and she made pot roast because she said the cold asked for it. We ate at the small table by the window, and Gerald called partway through dinner. She let it ring twice before answering, and I remember the way her face changed the moment she picked up. Polite. Careful. A different version of herself than the one who'd been laughing with me 30 seconds earlier about a burnt dinner roll. When she hung up, she sat back down and finished her plate like nothing had happened. I asked her what he wanted. She said, "He wanted to know if I'd thought about downsizing." Then she looked at me, and there was something in her eyes I didn't have a name for yet. Not anger, something quieter and more permanent, like a decision being made behind a closed door. "I have thought about it," she said. "I've thought about it very carefully. I didn't ask what that meant. I know now." Part 3. The Loss and Awakening. She got sick in the spring. I turned 21, quiet at first, the kind of illness that takes its time, like it wants you to notice every stage of the leaving. I visited every Sunday. I brought her the same lavender tea she always drank too fast because she liked it hot enough to sting. Gerald visited too, but differently. He started bringing folders. He started using words like estate planning and asset consolidation, in the same tone he used to talk about football scores. He said the word liquidate the way other people said lunch. That's the word they use for everything that used to be love. 3 weeks before she died, I came early for a Sunday visit and heard voices in the kitchen that smelled like cinnamon, the kitchen with the creaking floorboard. I stopped in the hallway. I didn't mean to listen, I just didn't move. Gerald was talking to Carol. "Once she's gone, we sell fast. Owen's got no legal claim. He's not even in the will as far as I know. We split it 3 ways, done in 60 days. Carol laughed, low and easy, like they were planning a vacation. I stood very still. My chest didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It went cold instead, and clear, like a window wiped clean. I said nothing. I walked back outside, waited. 5 minutes, and knocked on the front door like I'd just arrived. That was the moment I understood I was invisible to them, not unloved, invisible. A detail they hadn't bothered to plan around because they didn't think I was worth planning around. I decided, standing on that porch with my hand still raised from knocking, that if I was going to be invisible, I would at least be invisible on my own terms. In the weeks after that, I started doing small things without telling anyone. And I mowed her lawn on the days Gerald wasn't around to see it and take credit. I fixed the leak under the kitchen sink myself, instead of mentioning it to the family group chat, where nothing ever actually got done. I kept a spare key to that house on my ring long after anyone asked why. I didn't know what I was protecting yet. I just knew I wasn't going to let it rot while people argued over what it was worth. Grandma noticed. She never said much about it. But one Sunday, near the end, she squeezed my hand with more strength than I thought she had left and said, "You still watch hands, don't you?" I told her I did. She smiled like that answered something important. She died on a Tuesday morning in October, with the porch light still on from the night before, because nobody had thought to turn it off. I turned it off myself later that day, standing alone in a house that suddenly felt too quiet, listening for a creaking floorboard that didn't come. In the days after, I noticed how quickly the language around me changed. Gerald stopped saying Mum's house and started saying the property. Carol stopped saying her china and started saying the inventory. Nobody said it cruelly. They said it the way you'd talk about a job that needed finishing before a deadline, and that was almost worse than cruelty. Cruelty would have at least admitted what it was. I went back to the house one evening that week, alone, just to sit in it. The dent in the couch was still there. Her reading glasses were still folded on the side table, waiting for a hand that wasn't coming back for them. I didn't cry that night. I just sat very still, the way I'd learned to sit still in that hallway. And I let the silence tell me what to do next. The funeral was small. The reading of the will was smaller. 12 minutes in a lawyer's office that smelled like carpet cleaner, nothing like cinnamon at all. Gerald and Carol split the visible estate. The savings account, the car, a modest life insurance payout. The house wasn't mentioned. I sat in the corner and said nothing. the way I'd learned to say nothing in that hallway 3 weeks earlier. 2 days after the reading, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single key older than my apartment key, and a card with a name and a phone number. Marcus Whitfield, Whitfield and Associates. Nothing else. No note. Just her handwriting on the envelope. The same handwriting from 30 years of birthday cards. I waited 2 days before calling. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to sit with the possibility a little longer before it became a fact. Marcus Whitfield's office had none of the cinnamon smell, but something about his voice reminded me of hers. Careful, unhurried, like he already knew the ending of the story and wasn't in a rush to get there. "Your grandmother came to me 4 years ago," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "She set up an irrevocable trust in your name, Reeves Family Preservation Trust, funded specifically for the purpose of retaining or reacquiring the Maple Hollow property should it ever go to sale. She did not want your uncle to know it existed. She was very specific about that." I opened the folder. There was a full accounting. There was a letter in her handwriting dated 4 years back that started, "Owen, if you're reading this, it means I was right about them, and I am sorry for... In that, you always watched hands, now watch mine." The trust held enough, quietly invested and grown over 4 years, to outbid almost anyone who might come looking for a modest 3-bedroom house in a town nobody outside the family cared about. Marcus explained the rest. Gerald, as executor of the visible estate, had listed the house for sale 2 weeks after the funeral. Fast, under market value, through a small local agency he'd used before. He didn't know the trust existed. He didn't know I knew. He was already telling people at church the sale would close within the month. 3 nights before the closing date, I sat in my car outside Maple Hollow Road and watched the porch light come on with the timer Grandma had set years ago, a light that would keep coming on for a house it no longer belonged to for a little while longer. Through the hedge, I heard Gerald on the phone with Carol, going over numbers. 210 each, maybe 220 after fees. His voice light, easy, already spending money that was never going to arrive. Marcus had walked me through the numbers twice already in his office, on a whiteboard that still had someone else's handwriting half erased in the corner. The trust had grown steadily over 4 years. Conservative investments, nothing flashy, exactly the kind of quiet compounding Grandma would have approved of. It was enough. Not enough to feel rich, enough to feel certain. She asked me once, Marcus told me, closing the folder, what would happen if you didn't want the house at all, if you wanted the cash instead, or nothing, or somewhere else entirely. I asked what he told her. He said, "I told her the trust would simply dissolve to your benefit either way." She said that was fine. She said she didn't do this to trap you. She did it so you'd have a choice nobody could take away from you. I sat with that for a long time after I left his office. I texted Marcus 2 words. "We're ready." That night, Gerald went to sleep thinking he had 96 hours left before a payday. He had none. I drove home slowly that night, taking the long way, past the elementary school, past the diner Grandma used to take me to after piano lessons I hated. I thought about how strange it was that the biggest move of my life so far was going to happen in complete silence, with no one watching, no argument, no confrontation, just paperwork, moving quietly through a system while the people, who should have known better, slept soundly, certain of an outcome that had already been decided against them 4 years earlier in a lawyer's office they never knew existed. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from knowing something other people don't. It isn't smugness. It's closer to the feeling of finally understanding a joke you'd heard years ago and hadn't gotten at the time. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself, even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments. I read them. Marcus laid it out simply, the way you'd explain a recipe to someone who'd never cooked. The trust submits a competing bid through a Shell LLC, above asking, all cash, 30-day close. The listing agent has a fiduciary duty to present all offers to the seller, that's your uncle, as executor. He won't know the buyer is you until after the paperwork is signed, because trusts aren't required to disclose beneficiaries at the offer stage. Once it closes, the house is legally, permanently, irreversibly yours. I asked him what I needed to do. He said, sign here, and say nothing to anyone until it's done. 2 nights before the closing, Gerald called me. His voice had a warmth in it I hadn't heard since I was a kid, a rehearsed kind of warmth. Owen, listen, once this sells, there's a little extra in it for you. Family's family. Nobody wants this to be ugly. I understood exactly what he was doing. He was buying my silence with money that was about to stop existing. I told him, I'll think about it. My younger cousin Mia, 16 and sharper than anyone gave her credit for, cornered me in the kitchen of my own apartment that week. You've been weird, she said. Weirder than normal sad. What's going on? I told her I couldn't explain yet, but that it would make sense soon, and that she should trust me. She looked at me for a long moment, the way Grandma used to, like she was watching my hands instead of my mouth, and said, okay, I trust you. That was harder to hear than anything Gerald had said all week. The night before closing, I drove out to Maple Hollow Road alone. I sat on the porch steps in the dark, the timer light glowing behind me, and I let myself feel all of it for the first time. Not strategy, not silence, just grief. I wish this were different. I wish Gerald had been the kind of uncle who would have called me just to ask how I was doing, instead of calculating what I was worth to his plans. I wish he had earned the house the way she earned my trust. Slowly, patiently, with his hands and not his mouth. But wishes don't hold up under an audit. A trust document does. I cried on those steps, not loudly, not for long. Just the kind of crying that comes from finally understanding something you've known for a while. I thought, for one long minute, about calling Gerald and telling him everything. Just to see his face, just to end the waiting. I wanted to. Some small, tired part of me wanted the confrontation more than it wanted the win. But I remembered her voice in that kitchen, flour dust turning gold in the light. Watch what they do with their hands, not what they say with their mouths. I hadn't come this far to trade 4 years of her careful planning for 30 seconds of my own satisfaction. I stayed quiet. I let the porch light do the talking it had always done, on a timer. Just to see his face, just to end the waiting. I wanted to. Some small, tired part of me wanted the confrontation more than it wanted the win. But I remembered her voice in that kitchen, flour dust turning gold in the light. Watch what they do with their hands, not what they say with their mouths. I hadn't come this far to trade 4 years of her careful planning for 30 seconds of my own satisfaction. I stayed quiet. I let the porch light do the talking it had always done, on the timer, faithfully, without needing anyone's permission. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to turn. Part 6. The Midnight Moment. At 11:50 p.m. the night before closing, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and Marcus on a video call, his office lamp the only light behind him. Once you sign, there's no undoing it, he said. Not by Gerald, not by anyone. Your grandmother made sure of that 4 years. Ego, all that's left is for you to finish what she started. I signed. The cursor blinked, the document refreshed, and a line appeared at the bottom of the screen. Trust beneficiary, confirmed. Owen Whitmore. Marcus smiled, the small, tired smile of a man who had waited 4 years to see a promise kept. She'd be proud of you, Owen. Get some sleep. The clock on my laptop read 12:03 a.m. I am 29 years old. I am the legal owner of 214 Maple Hollow Road. And across town, in a house with the lights already off, Gerald was asleep, dreaming probably of a bank transfer that was never going to land, a transfer he believed would clear in 6 hours. He'll find out otherwise in about 9. I sat there a long time after the call ended, listening to my own apartment, which had no creaking floorboard, no cinnamon smell, nothing of hers in it at all. And somehow, for the first time in months, I felt like she was in the room anyway. The closing happened quietly, the way important things sometimes do, a courier, a signature, a confirmation email that Gerald wasn't copied on because he was never supposed to see it until it was final. That afternoon was Mia's birthday party, at Carol's house, cake and balloons, and a backyard full of relatives who had no idea what had happened 4 hours away in an escrow office. Gerald pulled me aside by the drink table, his voice still carrying that rehearsed warmth. "So, you thought any more about that little arrangement, the extra I mentioned?" I looked at him, calm, and said, "The house already sold, Gerald." He smiled, relieved. Good, that's to me." His smile didn't move for a second, like his face hadn't caught up to his ears yet. Then his phone buzzed, an email from his own listing agent, confirming the closing, confirming the buyer's name on the trust documentation, a name that resolved 3 clicks deep, to Owen Whitmore. He looked at me like I was still the kid who used to knead bread too long in his mother's kitchen. I wasn't. I hadn't been for 8 months. Carol came over holding a fork of birthday cake she never got to finish, her face doing the math out loud before her mouth caught up to it. "That's not possible," she said. "You don't have that kind of money." I told her I didn't. I told her Grandma did, and had, for 4 years, and had simply been waiting for someone to try what Gerald tried. Neither of them said a word for a long moment. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just picked up a balloon that had drifted near my foot and handed it back to Mia, who was watching all 3 of us with the same still, careful eyes her great-grandmother used to have. Gerald opened his mouth twice, like he was rehearsing something to say, and closed it both times without saying anything at all. There was nothing left in the folder he was holding that could change what had already happened 4 hours away, in an office with a signature that couldn't be undone. Grandma used to say, "Watch what they do with their hands, not what they say with their mouths." I always thought she meant something small, a lesson about honesty, about paying attention. She meant something bigger. She meant build your protection quietly while everyone else is busy talking. Gerald sold his share of the visible estate within the year and moved 2 states away. I hear he still tells people the house fell through. Carol and I speak maybe twice a year now, always careful, always polite, never quite like family again. Marcus Whitfield still handles the trust's paperwork and still calls every October near the anniversary just to see how the house is holding up. As for me, I still have the key. The real one, the old one, the one that came in an envelope with no return address. The porch light still comes on every evening on the timer she set. Years ago, and some nights I sit on those same steps in the same quiet, and the floorboard by the pantry still creaks in that one specific spot when I walk past it, like the house is still clearing its throat to tell me something. I think about her every time I hear it, and I think some people protect you with their voice, and some people protect you with their silence, and you don't always know which kind you were given until years later. If you've ever had to stay quiet, plan carefully, and wait for the right moment to protect what mattered to you. I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this story moved you, subscribe. There are more to come.